So where my bag starts is where my colon would begin, because I have no part of my colon, right? I had an ileostomy surgery. So small intestine attaches to the ileum, comes out into the bag. I've been on the carnivore diet now for over 15 months. And that is a consequence of my lifestyle, diet mostly. Think about this for a second. Have you ever found any meat in your stool? I always believed that plant foods were really healthy for us and that we actually needed to consume things like fruits and vegetables, whole grains, and just plants in their whole form, right, intact. That way they come with the fibre. And fibre is really important for promoting all round gut health. So, a healthy gut microbiome and regular healthy bowel movements and so on and so forth. I also believe that eating things like red meat was actually a problem and could promote the complete opposite. So it's hard to digest, it's highly inflammatory, it promotes constipation, and we should just moderate it. Be careful how frequently you're consuming things like red meat. Well, I've been on the carnivore diet now for over 15 months, and this right here is nearly 7 years old. And that is a consequence of my lifestyle, diet mostly. Leading up to that point, I was actually on a plant-based diet. You could call it a plant-based diet. I was consuming probably 70-75% plants. Every meal seemed to be based around grains, porridge oats in the morning, whole grain sandwiches for lunch, whole grain pasta, brown rice, and then I would accompany things like vegetables, a little bit of lean meat, lean fish. I wasn't vegan, but I mostly ate plants, and I was compulsive about consuming things like, tomatoes and peppers, mushrooms, onions. I made sure that my dish was quite colourful, and obviously that didn't work. I actually had a lot of inflammation in my colon. Just to run through a brief history of my health, I started to struggle in 2012. I got my diagnosis back. I had ulcerative colitis. The doctor said, increase fruits and vegetables, have whole grains, brown rice instead of white rice, brown bread instead of white bread, all this kind of stuff. And so I did. It wasn't until 2014 that I was actually now taking medication for my ulcerative colitis because it had actually gotten worse. I wanted to try and fix my problem and at least try and make my life easier. So I listened to the doctors, I ate more fibre, I consumed more plants, and I ended up losing my entire colon.
Cellulose is really hard to break down. Well, unless you're an animal like a cow.
I recovered, I went back to work, trying to accept this whole new situation, the way I looked, just the feeling of it all. I actually fell into a deep depression. And it wasn't until I stumbled across Michaela Peterson's anecdote where she was talking about how she cured her depression, she cured her autoimmune disease. She had multiple problems, but she cured the lot by going on an all red meat diet. So straight away, it's kind of like, oh, that's strange. It's the opposite of everything we've been told, all the advice, you quick Google search or what your doctor tells you. I was desperate and I thought, what the hell? I'm going to try this. The very first day my acid reflux went, 1 week went by, all my skin conditions improved by 50%. 3 weeks in, my skin was like clear, my acne in my back had gone, my teeth were better, no wax in my ears, my energy was way up, my sleep was up, depression gone, like completely gone. Then I started to create this YouTube channel, right? Start learning and uploading videos and this kind of stuff. And this is the interesting thing with me, is because I have a bag and I've eaten both a plant-based diet, even since having this bag after my surgery, and eaten a carnivorous diet with no plants in the diet whatsoever, I can actually tell you the difference in terms of how food breaks down, how food doesn't break down, the inflammation, the gas, the bloatedness, the obstructions, all this kind of stuff. So where my bag starts is where my colon would begin, because I have no part of my colon, right? I had an ileostomy surgery. So small intestine attaches to the ileum, comes out into the bag. So I can see exactly what state food is in as it would enter my old colon or anyone's colon. In my mind, I thought red meat, that's going to be an issue, right? But think about this for a second. And I know that this is a funny topic, but have you ever found any meat in your stool? Have you ever found a chunk of beef? Or a piece of bacon, or chicken leg, a prawn? Doesn't exist. And I can tell you for a fact that that does not happen because I wear a bag. I can actually see, because I empty this thing multiple times a day. I can feel the bag, no offense to anyone. And I can honestly tell you that all animal products, right, even red meat, they are all broken down entirely within our very acidic stomach acid. Our stomach acid is more acidic than dogs. Right? And you see what dogs eat. So all of this animal-based stuff is completely broken down in the stomach acid to the point where it's liquefied. it's genuinely like liquefied. If I was on a carnivorous diet and I had a colon, obviously it would be less liquidy. It would kind of stodge itself up, but you wouldn't have any material. There's no texture to it as such. Think about now plants, right? You find plants in your poop. You can actually see, if you just swallowed pieces of sweet corn, carrot and peas and stuff like that, they're still there intact, right? It does not change. And the funny thing is that when you have a colon, which I did, right, you don't notice this stuff because it's kind of condensed and solidified in your colon. By the time you go to the toilet, you might have a look, I don't know, you flush and it's done. You don't see a lot of what's going on. Plants, that stuff, however you finish chewing it, it doesn't change from that point onwards. Red meat, it's a breeze. Your stomach acid is very efficient at breaking down and liberating all the amino acids, the fatty acids. We then start to uptake those nutrients in the small intestine, and it's very easy on the system. I create very little gas and wind in the bag, right? Doesn't really happen so much. When I was eating plants, my bag filled up with air like I was blowing it up like a balloon. So we are just not designed to eat the rate of plant matter that apes eat and ruminant animals eat, just other primates, etc. Herbivores, they have larger cecums, they have larger colons, their teeth are dead flat. They actually ferment the fibre and they're nourished by fats. Only ruminant animals, in fact, can digest cellulose, and humans don't. So it's not that that's a benefit. That's going to cause inflammation, potentially. It's also going to block nutrients because it gets in the way of uptake of nutrients. So, okay, what's good about it? Well, once it's in the gut, the bacteria can feed on the fibre, and then that generates short-chain fatty acids. So that's the benefit, right? We generate short-chain fatty acids, and that promotes gut health and increases, healthy biota. Right. Cool. But is there another way of getting that benefit? Or is that exclusive to fibre? Well, actually, there is another way of getting that benefit. When you only eat meat or a very sensible ketogenic diet, you're going to be in ketosis. When you are eating lots of fatty acids and amino acids and you don't have any plant material, the bacteria in our gut can feed on those and generate the same beneficial short-chain fatty acids. So we don't need fibre. It's gone. It's debunked. Fibre's a fallacy. I hate to break it to people, but you don't have to feel constipated anymore. You don't have to feel bloated. And the funny thing is that today, if someone goes down to the doctor with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease, diverticulitis even, and all these problems, they will tell you to increase fibre still. And actually, that is the complete opposite of what they should do. I lost my colon, I became depressed, and ironically, I found the diet that would have prevented this whole thing. But I am grateful. I feel fantastic. Like I say, my energy's up. All my problems have gone. I don't have any complaints. I can't think of any complaints that I have, right? It's great. I love my food more than ever, but it's a healthy relationship. I'm addressing hunger and not a craving. So I would just like to briefly talk about the foods that are the worst, right? In terms of what's going to cause the most inflammation, the most gas, obstructions. This is also going to be beneficial to those that actually all have a bag as well. We have a tendency to have more obstructions with those fibrous foods. So off the top of my head, I don't know what you want to call a mushroom, but mushrooms are right at the top of the list, right? They are one of the worst for causing gas. And however you swallow that mushroom, it will not change through your entire system. And when you've got a stoma, which is what it's called, that protrudes from the abdominal wall, that corner that needs to kink around, it's a nightmare. I've swallowed large chunks of mushrooms before and had obstructions. So mushrooms are right at the top of the list. Things like celery, I think would pretty much goes without saying, though I do know someone who has Crohn's disease who snacks on celery, which is absolutely absurd, but celery is terrible. Celeriac, cabbage, all of these things very fibrous. Carrots, onions, even more so raw. All of these things raw are much worse, of course. Nuts and seeds, again, you've got to think, when you're chewing the nuts and seeds, they end up with these little sharp corners and you swallow them and they don't break down anymore. That's it, and so they're going to travel through your gut like sandpaper. I didn't know that certain other foods were so bad until I had the bag, and things like pineapple and mango, really, really terrible. They're so fibrous. Pineapple and mango are so fibrous that if you don't chew that up enough, it's going to cause you problems. Brown rice. On top of that list, alcohol, because it strips away your gut lining. Seed oils, because the molecules in seed oils, they go through the gut and change, so therefore inflammatory, cause permeability and things like that. Spicy foods are not a good idea if you have IBD. And pasteurized dairy. Pasteurized dairy is a mistake. Certainly if you have IBD, IBS, diverticulitis, I would stay away from dairy. If somebody said, well, look, I have to consume some carbohydrates in my diet, what would you recommend? I'm not advocating for these foods, but if you absolutely had to, Bananas, because they're quite soft and pliable. White rice, same sort of thing. It's broken down quite easily because it's got rid of that outer inner part of the grain. Brown rice is terrible, where white rice will be, less inflammatory. But again, I'm not advocating for rice. It's just going to spike your blood glucose. It's very poor in terms of what it offers in nutrients. Sourdough bread would be another one because it's partially fermented. But again, going to spike your blood glucose, offers very little nourishment. So if you have Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, IBS isn't life-threatening or anything, but it's a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. Who wants to deal with that stuff? And diverticulitis, if you have those kinds of problems, lower your fibre intake, starting with the most fibrous. If you feel like you do better on carbohydrates, most likely it's just because you haven't adjusted to a ketogenic diet, you haven't adjusted or transitioned into a carnivore diet in a healthy way. Maybe you feel like, it didn't work for me, you didn't stick with it long enough, or you rushed into it, your biome changed, you get what's known as the keto flu, and you felt a bit rough and you thought, this isn't for me, I couldn't do it. Lots of people tell me they go for a workout at the gym and, I just felt terrible, it didn't work for me. You can't just switch overnight and then go to the gym a week later and expect the same results. It's not going to work that way. I would genuinely spend 8 weeks. What's the rush, right? Spend 8 weeks transitioning into a carnivore diet. Transition slowly and then stick with it for another 6 weeks. Humans are born into ketosis. Even babies, when they're breastfed, they're mostly in ketosis. In nature, we would have weaned off breast milk, and there isn't just endless plants around. We didn't have refrigerators. There's not grains in a box every day with skimmed milk, which is just sugar on top of sugar. And then people add honey and have a sweet tea with it and add fruit. It's like you just ate sugar, mostly. I speak to people daily who adopt a carnivore diet or have already adopted a carnivore diet, have become well and truly adapted, love this way of life, and tell me they're off medication, they don't even flare anymore. I mean, that would have been a dream to hear. If somebody gave me that information and I stumbled across the right videos and just saw enough of them, I think, I'm convinced I'm going to try this, because what do I have to lose? It's hell. It's hell on earth when you're just flaring up. You feel like you haven't got any confidence to leave the house. And actually, even the fact that I lost my colon, which is technically like the only cure, right, the real cure, right, just to take your colon out, I wound up with a bag, and actually my life has drastically improved, not just because I'm not depressed anymore, but because the foods I'm eating, I don't feel the digestive process. I'm not aware of where the food is. I'm not aware of like the rumbling and the gas and the fermenting. That stuff is so uncomfortable. And so many people are just accustomed to that. It's inertia. Like you become accustomed to this suffering and you're not even aware of it until you cut it out. It's like, my goodness, that's how I'm supposed to feel. This is what being a proper human feels like, I'm nourished because I'm eating the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet. I'm not inflamed because they're also the least inflammatory, and they don't come with fibre, so I'm not getting these other symptoms like gas and cramping and all this stuff, right? So if you are looking after someone that's got a bag, or you got a bag yourself and you haven't heard about this information, you can 100% live on nothing but red meat, as long as it's fatty enough. If it's not fatty enough, add bone marrow, add butter, add egg yolks, and you're going to be well nourished. You can get down to, maximum 2 meals a day, but 1 meal a day is even better if you can. If you go to work and it's physical and you worry about energy, well, have a small breakfast and then a nice, decent dinner. I think that's a great way to go. Also, just eating all the time and trying to process food all the time is another problem in itself. You can have a massive steak and eggs, eat to satiety. You can't eat any more. You can go upstairs and get on with tasks. You don't actually feel uncomfortable afterwards. I've never regretted once on the carnivore diet what I've eaten, but the amount of times I would regret how much I ate when I was eating plants, like all the time, every day. In fact, I think I was like, oh man, why did I eat so much? Or why did I eat that? Oh, I knew that was going to happen. The seed oils, the way the seed oils make you feel, especially if you come off of them and you accidentally have seed oils, which I did once. Wow. Look, if you're caring for someone and they have a bag and you've been feeding them all these fibrous foods, it's not your fault. I didn't know. I mean, if I knew, right, I wouldn't have just continued and then lost my colon. I can't go back, and nor can you. So it's the same thing. It's not intentional. But unfortunately, we have been lied to about food. We have been lied to about a hell of a lot of things, honestly, but certainly food and pharmaceuticals. Fibre is definitely one of those lies.
And so, if you know anyone that has a bag, has IBD, maybe you're caring for someone like your mum or dad that's wound up with a bag, or you work in that environment and you tend to people that have a bag, I would definitely recommend getting rid of those foods on that list for sure. Mushrooms, mangoes, onions, pineapple, brown rice, seeds, nuts, spicy foods, alcohol, seed oils. Yeah, they're a real problem, and they're only going to make that person's life harder.
where the stoma protrudes from the abdominal wall, it has to go around a pretty tight corner, and that's where most people with a bag will have an obstruction. And so to get rid of those foods will minimize the risk of having an obstruction. It can be very uncomfortable. I've had a few. One was with brown rice, one was with mushrooms, one was with mango. So yeah, definitely get rid of those. But anyway, I hope you found this video interesting and that it was useful to you in some way. Feel free to share with anyone who has Crohn's colitis, anyone who has a bag. Feel free to ask me any questions you like. I always try and respond, emails, etc. I'll be interested to know actually how many people have Crohn's and colitis. If you know of someone who has a bag, drop it in the comments below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Appreciate you watching, guys. Thank you. I remember in the beginning, I started to introduce like takeaways into my diet after like 6 months or something of after recovering. In the morning, after having an Indian takeaway, my bag was full with air. How crazy is that?